two swordsmen. Neither of them had ever lost a fight. One morning they met on a small island and only one of them walked back to his boat. But the duel was already decided before either man drew. Tonight I'll tell you a story from Japan. It begins with two men who had never met and who had spent their whole lives getting ready for each other. In the same country, in the same years, there were two men who had never lost. One had learned the sword alone in the mountains from no one. The other had been trained from childhood by masters and had never once been beaten. Neither had ever met a man who could stand in front of him. Word travels. Each of them knew the other's name. And in a country this size, that leaves only one arithmetic. Sooner or later, there would have to be a mourning. The older of the two was called Miyamoto Musashi. He came from nothing, no school, no master worth the name. His father was a fighter who taught him very little except how to be hit. He left home young and never had another one. He fought his first duel at 13 and won it and walked away without looking back. After that, he simply kept going, village to village, man to man. He was building something, though he could not have told you what. He only knew that it was not finished. Most swordsmen of his day carried two blades and fought with one. Musashi asked why. Why let one hand stay empty? So he taught himself to fight with the long sword and the short sword together, one in each hand. It took him years to make it look simple. But the swords were never really the point. Distance was the point. Timing was the point. See the whole of a man, not the tip of his blade. Win the fight in your mind, then move. They came to test him, one after another. Famous men, proud schools. In Kyoto, he broke the greatest sword house in the country, the master, then his brother, then the rest of them waiting for him in the gray under a pine tree with bows. He walked out of that field alive. More than 60 duels, and he never lost one of them. He owned almost nothing. He belonged to no one. He slept where he could and moved on in the morning. The younger man was called Sasaki Kojiro. He was everything Musashi was not. Trained properly from a boy by a real master. Elegant, exact, beautiful to watch. Where Musashi was rough and strange, Kojiro was clean. He had a school of his own and students in it, a domain that paid him well and was proud to have his name on the list. He dressed carefully. He carried himself like a man who had never once been made to doubt. And he had earned all of it. He had never lost either. His sword was famous before he was. It was far longer than a sword had any right to be. So long that men joked it was a pole for drying laundry, and then stopped joking once they had seen him use it. A long blade is heavy. It is slow. In most hands, it is simply a mistake. In his, it was a wall of distance that no one could cross. You could not get near him. That was the whole problem of fighting Sasaki Kojiro. You could not reach him. And he had a cut that people spoke about quietly. They said he had built it out of watching swallows over a river. The way a swallow turns in the air, that impossible reversal, with no pause at all between one direction and the other. That was his technique. The blade came down and was already coming back up before the down had finished. Men who answered the first half met the second. They called it the swallow's turn. No one had solved it yet. So there were two ways to be the finest swordsman alive. One man had been given everything and had wasted none of it. The other had been given nothing at all and had built himself out of what was left. One of them was admired. The other was discussed the way people discuss weather. They had never met, but each of them was, quietly, the last thing in the world the other had not yet solved. A duel was arranged. The domain approved it. A small flat island was chosen out in the strait where no crowd could get close enough to interfere. A morning was set and an hour, 8 o'clock. The news moved faster than either man did. In the towns along the water, people who had never held a sword in their lives argued about which one of them would walk away. It had stopped being a fight. It was a question the whole province wanted answered. The night before, Kojiro prepared the way he always had. He cleaned the long blade. He slept. There was nothing in him that needed settling. He had beaten every man who had ever stood in front of him, and he expected this morning to be like all the other mornings. Certainty is not the same thing as arrogance. He had simply never been handed a reason. Musashi did not prepare at all. He was on the mainland in a borrowed room, and by every account he was in no hurry about any of it. He did not clean a blade. He did not sharpen anything. He had already decided what he was going to fight with, and it was not a sword. He slept late. That was, in its own way, the first move of the duel. The island that morning was flat and bright and cold. Kojiro arrived at the hour. His witnesses came with him. He stood on the sand with the long sword and looked out at the water. 8 o'clock came. Then it went. The tide moved, the light climbed, and the boat that was supposed to be bringing his opponent was not on the water at all. Far out on that water, in a small boat, Musashi was awake. He had taken a spare oar, a length of hard wood, longer than any blade in Japan, and he was shaping it as they rowed. Slowly. A rough sword made out of a boat. He was not being clever for the sake of it. Kojiro's whole method was reach, so Musashi was building more reach, out of wood, on his way to the fight. Then he finished it and lay down and rested. On the beach, the waiting went on. A man who has never doubted has no practice at it. Kojiro stood in the climbing light with the tide coming in over his feet and felt something he had no name for. Not fear, something smaller and worse. Irritation turning slowly into unease. Somewhere out on that flat water, a man he had never met was already doing something to him, and there was nothing there to cut. The boat came in late, and it came in with the sun behind it. Musashi stepped down into the shallows with the light at his back, so that Kojiro had to look into it to find him. He had chosen his hour. He had chosen his angle. He came out of the glare barefoot, holding a piece of wood, his hair tied back with a strip of cloth. He did not apologize. He did not explain. Kojiro drew and threw the empty scabbard into the water. It was a beautiful gesture. It said clearly that he would not be needing it again. And Musashi, watching it float away, said the one thing anybody remembers him saying that morning. If you have no more use for your sheath, you have already lost. It was not a taunt. He was telling the man plainly what he had just given away. Then there was nothing left to do but stand there. Two men on a beach, a few feet of wet sand between them, and behind them a whole country that had been arguing about this for months, both of them undefeated, both of them for the first time in their lives looking at something they had not seen before. The wind came off the water, neither of them moved. This was the part that mattered, and no one standing there could see any of it. Then it happened, and it was very fast. The longsword came up in the turn that had never once failed him, the swallow, that impossible reversal, and the tip of it found the cloth tied around Musashi's head and cut it away clean. A hair lower and this would be a different story. But the wooden sword was already coming down. Once. Only once. And it was over. Kojiro was on the sand, and the tide was already reaching for him. He had done nothing wrong. He had fought exactly as well as he had always fought. He had simply met a man who had started the duel the day before, out on the water, with a piece of wood. Musashi did not stand over him. He bowed once and walked back to the boat and rowed away, and the shore stayed silent behind him. The winner lived another 30 years. He fought no more duels worth the name. He painted, he wrote. He grew old in a cave with a brush in his hand, trying to put into words the things his hands had always known. The loser is remembered for one morning. That is the hard part of it. Sasaki Kojiro was one of the finest swordsmen his country ever made, and he is famous for the single minute in which he came second. 400 years later, people still argue about that beach. Whether Musashi was late on purpose, whether the oar was fair, whether the swallow's turn could have been answered any other way at all. It lasts because it was never really about who was stronger. It is about a man who understood that a fight begins long before the swords do, and another man, every bit as good, who had never once needed to learn it. The island has a name now, and it was taken from the man who lost. Ganryu was the name of Kojiro's school, Ganryujima, Ganryu's Island. The place where he was beaten carries his name, and not the name of the man who beat him. It is a strange sort of memorial. Every person who crosses that water says his name without meaning to. The country did not forget him. It simply remembers him standing in the wrong morning. I keep thinking about the man who lost. He did everything right, and it made no difference at all. I'm not sure that's fair. I'm not sure fairness has anything to do with it. I wonder what you think. What about you? Good night.